Now let's talk about special effects, and we're going to be looking at EBSynth again, not for colorization, but for special effects rotoscoping. First, another little story time. In 2007 and 2008, I wrote, directed, edited, and did special animation effects for a low-budget live-action feature film called Shamelessly She Hulk. This was, of course, an origin story for the Marvel Comics superheroine, Jennifer Walters, the sensational She Hulk, who's one of my favorites. Marvel is now making a TV series with this character, but this was before Marvel movies were really even a thing. They were still shooting Iron Man when we were shooting our little fan film for no money, and that's part of the joke of the film, that she's worried about adapting her story into a low-budget movie because a lot of Marvel movies had failed. Kirsten Elrod and Leslie Youngblood played She-Hulk and Jennifer and were amazing. We had a great cast. We didn't have a lot of money. The producer's mother had a lot of money, but I didn't really want to spend a lot of his money. I thought that would be cruel, and it was a fan film, so I wanted to make this movie without spending a lot. It cost about $10,000, and half of that was the camera, which wasn't even HD. It was a Panasonic Mini DV camera. High quality then, but very dated now. And I also wanted to shoot an HD film at the same time, which wouldn't have been a fan film. It was something that I owned and which we could take to film festivals, and we never shot it. I wrote it, and the producer didn't understand it. So Shamelessly She Hulk was what we got. And this was a really ambitious project. It was too ambitious, really. We shot 55 hours of footage. I actually had an idea that we'd shoot a sequel as well. I had an idea for like a big budget sequel, and we even shot some of it. This is a 2-hour movie that we shot for no money, and the insane part is that almost every frame of the movie had to be an animated special effect. She-Hulk is a green superheroine, and we weren't going to paint our actress green every day for a month. That would be impossible, and it would also look bad. Even Hollywood, it doesn't look good when they paint a woman green. And I wanted her skin to look natural, so the green color is added in post-production. So if she's on location with other actors, I have to go in frame by frame and draw around her, draw her out, make a mask around her on every frame so that I can turn her green. Frame by frame animation, which is insane. And this is why the movie never came out in full, because it's this cheap little fan film that requires an insane amount of work on every shot. Frame by frame by frame. I worked on editing this movie for years, and there are a lot of scenes I never even edited because I was so focused on getting the effects done. I look back on my work on this movie 10, 12, 13 years ago, and I don't know how I did all that work. I was younger then. I had the energy. I don't now. Most of the time we were only shooting one actor at a time, so it's hard to cut the movie together in a way that looks natural. We shot a lot of green screen, and it's not a good idea to shoot green screen on Mini DV. If you've got a good HD camera, shooting green screen is fine, but the old Mini DV cameras, Mini DV's color compression is actually really low quality and nasty. The color is half the resolution that the video is, and the video is already very low ST quality. And when the color is very saturated, it gets blocky and pixelated. So I had to blur the footage and use 7 or 8 different layers and all kinds of fancy tricks to get the green screen to look at all acceptable. It was a very complicated effects process just because we'd shot the film on a low quality format. Today, the technology is better. I can fix these shots and get much better results now. I wish I'd had this technology back then, and I wish I'd had an HD camera then. But whatever. So if I have a green screen video that's shot on Mini DV, the green screen is going to look really blocky and bad. But if I render it out in After Effects, the program will smooth out that color automatically. I can render it out using a semi-lossless codec like Logarith or Apple ProRes or Cineform. I used to work on Mac and I really like the ProRes codec, but there is definitely a mismatch with Premiere and After Effects and QuickTime. Especially on PC, but also on Mac, they read the Apple QuickTime codecs as darker than they are, and you can ruin your footage really easily, lose all your details. So I'm going to use probably Logarith and not ProRes. I could use lossless, but it takes up a lot of drive space. I could also use Cineform, which used to be GoPro Cineform. I think it's changing my color. I'm still experimenting. Codecs are a thing. Codecs are a pain in the butt. Like, what format is your video in is a whole thing. But I think it's really helpful when you're doing green screen and blue screen and whatever, chromakey, to think of that as being a black and white image of its own. Like, you can composite your chromakey layer as just an image that's a black and white matte and maybe is a little softer, maybe is looser and more blended. And then once you have that video, you can raise the contrast later. So I would render out a very soft chromakey out of my mini DV to just soften out all the blockiness, all the pixelation, anywhere it didn't look good. I'd put in a lot of work. I would handle different parts of the image differently. I really focused on getting her hair looking right. I would noise reduce just the chroma key layer. But I was creating this black and white matte image of video and just making it look right. And it was softer than what I actually wanted to use. I would soften it down and then raise the contrast up in post. So I had something that was really smooth because I'd softened it, and also really sharp because I'd raised the contrast and sharpened it up a lot. This is very inside baseball and boring, but it is helpful to think of chroma key as its own black and white image. When I was dealing with really low quality chroma key that we'd shot, you can still get a pretty good result if you actually look at what you're doing. When it's a really black and white matte image, you kind of see what you're doing, you see what doesn't look right, and what is kind of fizzing, what's pixelated, what's fizzing around the edges, and what doesn't work. I have a green screen video shot on mini DV that would normally look really blocky and bad right out of the camera. I have installed Neat Video Noise Reduction into Premiere and After Effects, which I do recommend as a purchase, and I'm going to select the noise and grain that's visible in the video on like a flat white wall or something, or in this case a green screen. And I'll build a noise reduction profile from that. I'm going to set noise reduction to 0, actually, 0 luminance and 0 chroma, because I just want to reduce the noise based on temporal smoothing. The movement of the video and the grain will show Neat Video how to reduce the noise here. I don't need any more than that. And I'm going to set this to 1 or 2 frames of temporal smoothing, and that's usually enough. More if it's a really noisy video, but you don't need much. I'm going to set that smoothing to about 167% and render. The result takes all the noise and grain out, and it also really smooths out the green screen. So that looks great, actually. Much better than a grainy old mini DV home video should. That also allows you to think of removing the background behind characters who maybe weren't even done with chroma key properly, or where you're removing other stuff that was in the chroma key that you don't want, or putting stuff back in. And I've been using the website remove.bg to remove the background behind characters who I didn't even shoot on green screen, and then generate more frames of that with EBSynth. So there's a lot you can do when you're creating your chroma key as its own black and white mask. And today we're going to be doing that. We're going to be opening up EBSynth again. And first we're going to be opening up Photoshop. So we're going to turn She-Hulk green in scenes which weren't green screen, where she was on location with other actors. And that means we have to draw a mask around her on every frame. And yes, this is a lot of work. And yes, I really did have to draw every frame of these sequences back in the day, especially if there was really fast motion like fighting. You'd have to draw every frame. If it's slower motion, I could draw every 2 frames or every 4 frames or every 6 frames, and that's still a lot of frames. I would then slow that down in After Effects, or before I had After Effects, I used Twixtor. After Effects can slow down footage with pixel motion and generate new frames in between the old frames. The old After Effects CS6 does an okay job of this, but not a great job. So if there was fast action or fighting, I really did have to draw in every goddamn frame, and that's why this movie never came out in full. I do think that the new After Effects Creative Cloud probably does the pixel motion better, but I am an old broke millennial, so I'm gonna keep using the old software as long as I possibly can because I'm not gonna pay for a monthly subscription. Sorry, Adobe. But a lot of my projects were like that, just kind of crazy ambitious. It was a very ambitious project. It was a crazy amount of work, too much work eventually, and there was no money to do it. And I worked on it for years, and it never came out. And it probably should have been popular, but that's not a good way to become popular on the internet. There were too many projects that became secret or not well known because they just kind of fizzled out and never came out properly. If you know my work, I'm pretty famous for restoring an animated film by Richard Williams called The Thief and the Cobbler. That was supposed to be his masterpiece. He spent 25 years animating one film. He was a master animator. A lot of people called him the greatest animator alive, and he died this past year. And he worked 25 years on this movie that he wanted to be his masterpiece, and he never finished it. So I spent 8 years restoring it. Now, I wasn't working on it full-time for 8 years, but 2 or 3 years of that, I was working on it full-time, painting out dirt and cleaning up frames, frame by frame by frame, for years. I live-streamed some of it. And I also restored hundreds of Muppet specials. I did a lot of Muppet fan DVDs, and some of that was frame by frame, painting out glitches and cleaning up VHS sources. And people just take it for granted now that they can watch these things on YouTube or whatever, and nobody has any idea that somebody restored this material. But I usually spent weeks on everything. Anyway, when EBSynth came out, I thought, this is a time saver. All the frame-by-frame effects that I had to do on She-Hulk and all the stuff I never finished and all the new stuff I'm doing now, because I'm still making films and restoring films, EBSynth can help. In theory, I don't have to draw every frame anymore. I can just draw some of the frames and let EBSynth follow the motion and render out the rest. Remove.bg, the background removal website, was really helpful for this sort of thing as well. Again, it uses AI to paint out the background behind a person or object. It usually gets it right and is really useful. I can use the website or use the API or the application. You sign up with your email and get 50 free frames per month at standard definition. These are 500 by 500 pixel images or thereabouts, and I've removed the background behind this character or behind this character so that they can be in a different scene. And that's very nice, and you can use EBSynth to help generate the rest of the frames. And it sounds like I'm doing a promotion for some of these, but I'm not. These are free programs, at least at the level I'm using them at, and I found them really useful. So let's see how EBSynth handles rotoscoping. First off, I actually have to do some rotoscoping, and I've been doing rotoscoping on this film for 13 years, so I think that'll be a natural for me. Oh boy. Yeah, my projects like this film sort of became traps eventually. But these are black and white animated masks which are drawn around the character frame by frame. And normally if she's moving fast, like in a fight scene, I do have to draw every single frame. If she's not moving as much, it might be every fourth frame, and then I'll slow it down in After Effects pixel motion. Still a lot of frames. This time around, we're going to be drawing every 10th frame or so, I think, which is much quicker. We might draw every 10th or 20th frame if it's slow, and every 4th frame if it's fast, and that's a big time saving, so thank you, Secret Weapons, and thank you, EBSynth. So first off, we've exported every shot that we're rotoscoping as an image sequence in its own directory, and we'll copy and paste a copy of that directory also because we want to keep a clean copy of this scene, and also a copy where we've redrawn some of the frames as keyframes. This is tracing frame by frame. It's a form of animation which we call rotoscope. It's a very simple process. It is a lot of work though. Now I'll click the record and playback buttons here in Photoshop. I create automated actions for what I need to do to prepare a frame for rotoscoping, and then to prepare and save a frame after rotoscoping. So any action that I'm just doing over and over again, I'll automate that so it's just one click. So all I have to do is draw around the outline of the character and then click select. I don't have to make my layers and set their blending mode. I don't have to fill it in. That all gets done for me. I can finish a frame in a minute or two. So I just keep going and finish, finish, finish. I open up a few frames at a time here. You can do that in Mac OS X, but I've also edited my Windows 10 so that there's a right-click option to send multiple files to Photoshop. I've got a frame open here, and my automated action creates a few different layers. There's an adjustment layer to make it brighter so I can really see what's going on in the dark parts of the frame. And there's an all-white frame that I've filled in whose blending mode is set to multiply and set at a low opacity. And then I can just draw around the outline of the character and see what I'm doing, and I'm done. I then select the outline of the character, and I have an automated action to fill in all the black parts of the frame and save the image, or anything else I need. It's pretty quick. The idea is to do as many frames as possible quickly. So anything you find yourself doing over and over and over again, like creating layers, setting the opacity and blending mode, swapping your color swatches, filling in black areas, flattening and saving the image, and so on, there's a lot that you can put into automated actions again so they're one click, and all you're doing is just the drawing part. Now, I do have a graphics tablet. I wouldn't want to be drawing this with a mouse. It can be done with a mouse. I do use both, but it's not great to draw with a mouse. I have a tablet pen here, and I've mapped the little clicky buttons on the pen to swap out my color swatches, which is really helpful. I can swap between black and white with one click of the pen. And my monitor is an older and very outdated Wacom Cintiq, so I'm drawing directly onto the monitor. And again, this is an obsolete model that I got for cheap on eBay because I'm a broke millennial. And so, after a day of work, all the keyframes that we've bothered to draw are done. These are black and white images, and we're going to now render the rest of the frames in EBSynth. We have three directories now. There's the original image sequence, direct from the actual film. Then there's the keyframe directory where I painted some of the frames, and there's an output directory. And I'm going to start our EBSynth project. I'll specify my directories and file names by dragging and dropping the file names which already exist. 23 times we'll fill the screen with that, and I'll save a copy of this EBSynth and copy that several times because we've got a lot of keyframes and we're going to need several projects to hold them all. And then in each EBSynth project, I'm going to type in a lot of numbers. I'm going to type in what all of my keyframes are, and you see the arrows going backward and forward to what frame they need to stop on. So I can specify a frame number going backward and or forward, which I would like EBSynth to render to using that keyframe. And sometimes that's stopping at the end of the shot or at the end of the scene, but most of the time it should be a number that's about halfway between this keyframe and the next keyframe. So I've got Windows Explorer or Mac Finder open, and I'm just looking at my image sequences and looking at the frame numbers, and I type in the numbers that I want, and I then click the purple button that says Synth, and it starts to render. Now, I've gotten a little ahead of myself because there is a problem here. EBSynth is a style transfer program, and a simple black and white mask does not have a lot of style to it. It's just a flat black area and a flat white area. Because it's a compositing mask, a selection, a tracking matte, a traveling matte, whatever you want to call it, right? Right. In my experience, a flat colored image like this breaks EBSynth. EBSynth will render it, but missing parts, especially around the edges of the frame, the image will just kind of melt like a candle when it's just black and white. It's not going to give us the really accurate animated mask that we want. It should, but it doesn't, at least at default settings. So let's click the Advanced tab in EBSynth. Now, there's currently no documentation about the features of EBSynth, so there may be something I'm missing here. But the mapping is set to 10.0. If you set this to 50 or 100, you'll get much better results with this kind of flat color and black and white mask. I found the results to be almost usable. We want the keyframes to carry more weight. We want the result to look exactly like the keyframe. But we can do better than that. A black and white mask has no texture, and it seems like EBSynth wants even its output to have some kind of filmic texture that it can hang on to. I don't know. All I know is what I've noticed works and what doesn't. So let's give EBSynth some texture to hang on to. We need to include some trace of the original image as well as the black and white mask. In Photoshop, let's open up one of our frames and also its matching keyframe. So, okay, an RGB image is actually made up of 3 different black and white images. The software composites them together into one Technicolor picture, just like Technicolor film did back in the day. So we have a red, green, and a blue channel. What if we keep 2 of those channels and replace one of them with our black and white matte? There we go. The black and white matte is still there in the blue channel, but the rest of the image should be more to EBSynth's liking. It's blue. A dabba dee dabba die. Now, if I'd known I could have done this with an automatic Photoshop action and actually saved all my keyframes to look like this. Since I didn't, I'm going to go into After Effects and re-render the image sequence now, because that's probably the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to put an image sequence of my keyframe mattes on one layer as video and put my original video on another layer. And I'm going to add a video effect of set channels to both layers, which will allow me to work with the red, green, and blue channels separately. And you can get lots of weird effects from doing this. You can work with the red, green, and blue channels of video separately and add like glitching and distortion and weirdness. But for this, on the video, I'm going to set the blue channel to none, and on the mattes, I'm going to set the red and green channels to none. And then I'm going to set the blending mode to add, so it adds the 2 together. One is missing red and green, one is missing blue, and there you go. So that should do it. There we go. So okay, I've now got all these blue keyframes, which I'm going to call blue keys. It's an Undertale reference. And that should work a lot better. I'm going to render all my keyframes in EBSynth one more time using my original projects, which I saved. So the final result is much better without any of that weirdness. It also, of course, looks very blue and yellow, but again, I can set the channels so that the blue channel is used for all 3 channels, and suddenly we've got a clean black and white matte again with no trace of the original image. Which I didn't expect. I thought there'd be some noise, but EBSynth did a really good job of keeping the different channels clean and keeping the image clean, so that's great. And here's the result. It's not perfect. There's still some melting around the edges, and I see a few places where I still have to draw and render a few more keyframes because there was a lot of motion. But basically, this saved me a whole lot of work and did a much better job than I did by hand. The worst things about this animation is actually the parts where you can see I drew it by hand and it looks inconsistent. So EBSynth made this a lot better than it would have been. It's a really complicated mask. And I was able to do that on a limited number of frames, but if I was doing every frame, you would have definitely seen a lot of boiling and a lot of difference from one frame to the next. We call that boiling. It would have looked like a mess. Like there's red blood on her back in this shot that EBSynth had to track, and it has to look consistent from one frame to another. There's also Morris's hand when he's holding Jennifer's head. You see his hand through her hair with some transparency, and that has to be really consistent or it looks weird. So my drawn version of that wasn't consistent, and I'm going to do a little more work and fix that. But yeah, overall, a really good result. And here's the final composite. I've got a few different layers here. One is the video, and then there's the black and white tracking mats above it, which mat out part of the video. And I've added a tracking mat effect to the video there. And below that are two different copies of the video where I've shifted the colors so that She-Hulk will look green. One, I've just changed the hue, saturation, lightness. I've shifted the hue until she's green. And another, I actually kept the hue the same, so she's got pink skin, but I color corrected it a bit to be greener overall, and I set that at 50% opacity. And so that's a pretty good result. I'm used to editing this in Final Cut Pro 7, an old Mac program, and I'm used to the color correction in there, but for Premiere, this is pretty good. So thanks for joining me. I hope you found this informative. If you are doing colorization and special effects work with EBSynth and these other tools, or if you just enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments, like and subscribe, you know the drill. You can also contribute to my Patreon, that's Patreon Garrett Gilchrist. And if you have any questions, comment below or visit my message board and forum at orangecow.org or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, whatever. And I hope you have a terrific year.